of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months. It's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now.
In a dramatic and highly anticipated meeting that brought to the forefront the complex and often contentious dynamics of the U.S. Canada relationship, newly elected Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and U.S. President Donald Trump convened for a wide-ranging discussion. Welcome viewers to my channel. If you're new here, please subscribe, like my video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. The conversation, which took place in the Oval Office, touched on critical issues including international trade, national sovereignty, and the distinct personalities of the two leaders. The most unforgettable moment of the encounter, which quickly became the focus of intense media coverage and public commentary, occurred when President Trump, returning to a provocative theme he has often raised, floated the astonishing idea of Canada becoming the 51st state of the United States. Carney, who had built his entire successful electoral campaign around a promise to stand up to the U.S. president and his policies, delivered a resolute and unequivocal rejection of the proposal. This firm response was a direct and powerful reflection of the sentiment of a Canadian public that had grown increasingly apprehensive and weary of Trump's policies, which had included the unilateral imposition of debilitating tariffs on key Canadian products and frequent, inflammatory rhetoric about the potential annexation of the country. A meeting of diplomatic contradictions. The initial moments of the meeting were a masterclass in diplomatic contradictions, creating a jarring and almost surreal atmosphere. It began with an almost hyperbolic display of mutual flattery, a striking contrast to the recent friction and animosity that had characterized the relationship between the two nations. President Trump initiated the praise, lavishing compliments on Carney by calling him a very talented person and going so far as to describe his recent election victory as one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine. In a reciprocal gesture that seemed designed to de-escalate tensions, Carney commended Trump as a transformational president, specifically praising his relentless focus on the American worker, securing your border, and securing the world. Carney's acknowledgement of Trump's role in revitalizing NATO was particularly noteworthy and strategic, given the internal disagreements and strain that have recently plagued the long-standing alliance, a point of frequent criticism from Trump himself. This initial cordiality and public praise, however, proved to be a fleeting prelude to a more confrontational and substantive exchange. The atmosphere in the room shifted palpably when Trump, a former real estate mogul, once again brought up the controversial possibility of a wonderful marriage that would see Canada absorbed into the United States. Carney was clearly prepared for this moment, having anticipated that the president might broach the subject. Drawing on Trump's own professional background, he employed a powerful, memorable, and highly effective analogy. He likened Canada to iconic, priceless properties that, by their very nature and value, are simply not for sale. He cited the Oval Office itself and Britain's Buckingham Palace as prime examples of such irreplaceable assets. As you know from real estate, Carney stated with a deliberate tone, there are some places that are never for sale. He then delivered a definitive and resolute message directly to the president. Having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign in the last several months, it's not for sale. Won't be for sale ever. Trump's brief, unyielding reply, never say never, underscored his unwillingness to fully abandon the provocative and long-standing idea, even in the face of a direct rejection. Trade disputes and the path to negotiation. The conversation eventually pivoted to the deeply contentious and economically significant issue of trade, which has been a primary source of tension and a key flashpoint in the relationship. Trump has imposed a significant 25% duty on Canadian steel and aluminum, along with other sector-specific import taxes on goods like cars. He reiterated his long-held belief that the U.S. was unfairly subsidizing Canada's military and didn't need to import its goods, arguing that the U.S. should prioritize its own domestic production. When a journalist directly asked if anything could persuade him to lift the tariffs, Trump's response was blunt, unwavering, and dismissive. No, it's just the way it is. He also expressed a general skepticism toward the urgency of trade deals, stating, "We don't have to sign deals. They have to sign deals with us. They want a piece of our market. We don't want a piece of their market." This rhetoric reflected his America First approach and a belief in the superior negotiating power of the U.S. Despite this firm and seemingly intractable stance, Carney left the meeting with a surprising and measured sense of cautious optimism. At a subsequent press conference held at the Canadian Embassy, he reported that he had pressed the case for lifting the tariffs and found Trump willing to have that negotiation. Carney was realistic about the potential difficulties and obstacles ahead, acknowledging that the process would involve zigs and zags and difficult aspects. But he stressed that the key takeaway was that the prospect is there. He also emphasized the crucial importance of distinguishing between Trump's personal wish for Canada to become a U.S. state and the reality of a negotiation between two sovereign nations. He expressed confidence that Trump ultimately understood this distinction, despite his public rhetoric. This meeting was a stark and significant departure from the consistently adversarial and often hostile relationship Trump had with Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau. It also stood in sharp contrast to a recent, tumultuous blow-up in the Oval Office involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where Trump's negotiating style had been a subject of international concern. Carney's campaign had been largely defined by a stance of resistance against the U.S., with him even declaring that the historically strong relationship between the two countries was over and that Canada needed to fundamentally reimagine our economy in the Trump era. This context is particularly significant given the massive economic interdependence between the nations. Last year alone, more than $760 billion in goods flowed between Canada and the U.S., with Canada being the U.S.'s second-largest individual trading partner and its biggest export market. The outcome of the trade negotiations initiated at this meeting will therefore have profound and far-reaching implications for both countries' economies and the future trajectory of their relationship. The public will be watching closely as both leaders' teams are set to speak again in the coming weeks, a time frame that Carney did not specify. This meeting laid the groundwork for what will likely be a challenging but potentially fruitful series of discussions, marking a new chapter in the U.S.-Canada relationship.